Hi, this is Matt Dale. This is the Quantum Leap podcast, and I'm really happy because today I've managed to get an interview that I didn't think I'd ever be able to get. I'm so happy to have with me Becky Broderick, writer of one of the innovation comics, A Tale of Two Cindy's. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be
Thank you
here.
so much for joining me. Now, Becky's quite unique, and this is why I wasn't sure if this would ever happen, in that I'm speaking to a lot of people who are, have had big careers in the comic industry and delved into Quantum Leap for a few days. You are not a big name in the comic industry, if I understand this right. So
No.
maybe I could start off just by asking a little bit about you, anything you'd like to share about who you are and what you do when you're not being a Quantum Leap writer, and then we'll start delving into your memories from way back when.
Yeah. Well, helped write that story back when I was 19, and I'm 50 now, so that's quite a difference. I guess, I had started out wanting to be a writer, and it just never really, I've written things, I've gotten to do like some blogging, entertainment sites, things like that. I wrote for the Project Runway blog once. They asked me to do it, even though I know nothing about fashion. I'm like the least qualified person to write that. But so I've done things like that. I just never could make it. When I lived in New York, I knew a lot of people who were writers, and they were chasing those dreams. And I just know that they were like all poor and miserable, and you really had to make it your full-time job to send out pitches and do all that. And I guess I just didn't have the patience for it, even though I loved writing. So I kind of just went on, the standard track towards, what I went to school for, which was marketing. And I'm just kind of like, I was in a marketing job, and then the pandemic hit and kind of forced me into a property management role. And that's what I'm doing now. It's kind of like babysitting adults, really. So that's where I'm at now.
Shift.
Yeah.
Marketing.
It was. Yeah, well, it was because the property that I worked at I was working for like a big outdoor property that was like a mixed use place. It was like, it had retail and restaurants, and then it had one apartment building there. So then when the pandemic hit, I was planning all the events. So they obviously had to cancel all of the events. And then they actually sold the property. And when they sold it, the new owners decided to outsource all the marketing. So all that was left was that apartment building. And luckily, I would have been out of a job completely, one of the many who would have been laid off during the pandemic. But the new property managers reached out and said, "Hey, you're already, familiar with this property. Do you want to come over and be the manager?" I was like, "Sure." So that's how I ended up doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think 2020 was a pivot for a lot of us. A lot of surprises. So wow. Well, yeah, I can genuinely say I've not had anyone on the show with that kind of background before. So I warned you about this off mic before, but all my standard questions out the window. But you did say you started off wanting to go into writing. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the comic, and were you even interested in Quantum Leap at the time, or was this just, hey, here's an opportunity, let's go for it?
Oh, yeah, I loved the show. I used to watch the show all the time. And my brother, George, was, he started this job with Innovation and had told me that they were doing Interview with the Vampire, which I also was a big fan of. Any vampire stories back then, I was big into that. And then he told me about Quantum Leap. And I don't know, it just came about. He would tell me, about the stuff that they were working on. And, we used to talk about Quantum Leap a lot because we both loved the show. And I don't know, it was just like an idea that came one day. I was like, I always wondered like what would happen if he into a twin, because, they always talk about this twin ESP, powers that twins have. And would he keep I just kept tossing around the idea, would he keep going back and forth between the two, or would one be able to see him, and how would that work? And so that's kind of how it came up. And he was like, "Oh, well, put something together, like a story idea together, and we'll work on it together." And I was terrible at dialogue, so I was like, I don't know how to write dialogue for these, and, you know, especially in like a comic book, it's even different than if you were to write, you know, like a manuscript or something for a TV show or something like that, where you could be a little more in depth with the dialogue too, where you have to be like short and punchy with comic books. And he knew how to do that. So I basically kind of came up with the story, and then we worked on it together, and he, you know, really made the characters talk to each other. So
did you make it sound like a fairly straightforward process? Did you have to push particularly, or was George kind of encouraging you along the way to make sure that you had your place within this run of authors that he was commissioning?
well, yeah, I mean, he had just said that if I had come up with a story idea and kind of made an outline for it, and that if it was interesting, if it was something that they wanted to pursue, then they would. So I guess, you know, being my brother, I had a little inside inside line there. But he liked the idea, so we would work on it together. From what I remember, I know there were things that got changed, and you know, it's funny. When I think about it now, I think of it like one of my pet peeves with every like current entertainment is that every time there's a woman who has to go through something, she has to be raped. You know, that's like this, and it's just like this. I always feel like it's such lazy writing, because it's like this crutch that everyone leans on. It's like, oh, well, you want to. If it's like this hard woman that you need to like at some point, yeah, let's have her get raped, you know, and then we'll sympathize with her. Or even like you have to have this troubled woman, and why is she troubled? Oh, she got raped, you know. So it's like this trope that just it's so annoying to me. And I'm like, so I look back at that magazine, and I'm like, I can't remember if that was my idea or his. And I for some reason I feel like there was like a murder originally involved, but again, like my memories of this are a little bit hazy, because obviously it was a gazillion years ago. But I do remember us then like turning it into more of like because I guess Quantum Leap had a lot of those type of stories where you have to prevent this death or this, you know. So I think it was like, maybe let's make it a little something different, where I think, and I can't remember if this is how it turned out, that I think she would eventually kill herself or something like that, like if she were to be raped by this person. So that, I guess some of that got like changed, and he, you know, I kind of trusted him to massage the story a little bit, because you know, he had this experience in comic books, and it's definitely different than just like telling a story in another way, where, you know, you have to keep wanting to turn the page, I guess. So he kind of knew how to make that happen.
And you mentioned the trope. One of the things that I find interesting about this, and this happened 3-4 times in the comic books short range, is that this came shortly after an episode of the series where Sam leaped into a rape victim. Do you recall the timing around that? Was it because I know in some cases there were writers that came in and pitched things and then had to pivot because by coincidence there were similar things going on TV. So you don't know if you were inspired by the episode or just had already started writing it and went, you know, we're going to go ahead anyway.
No. And I don't, that's why I'm saying, like, I don't even remember if that was the original story or if it was supposed to be something else. But yeah, I think for some reason I'm thinking that might have come about because he had that idea to, like, because when we were talking about, like, would he jump back and forth, and we were like, well, that would probably be too confusing for readers. And then, so I think then the idea that, like, to have him at the end sort of like leap into the other one. And so then I guess, how do you do that? I think that was kind of like his way out of that, like, you know, oh, okay, we make it, something else happens.
Yeah.
To make him leap out of that girl and into the other one. And she doesn't actually get raped, but you know, I don't know. I guess I wish I could remember exactly how we were thinking about it. He might have, you know, when you talk to him, he might have a little bit of a better memory, but yeah, I don't remember feeling like we were necessarily inspired by any particular episode of the show. And I couldn't, I mean, I loved the show and I watched it all the time. I couldn't tell you a plot of any, any episode at this point, like, because I haven't watched the show in so long. You know, I just remember, you know, oh boy, I remember that in every episode, and it used to drive me crazy a little bit. But I don't recall feeling like, I felt like it had never been on the show, the twins thing, and that's what it was my big, like, that was what I was interested in, like how that would actually work, how that would play out because of everything you hear about twins. So I just thought it would be like an interesting concept. So to me, it was like, I was more of like the concept person, and then he like could really kind of help flesh out the story.
And that ending gave us two really interesting things, and one of them I already know from what you've just said is going to have been a coincidence, but the episode Raped from 91, from a few months before this was published, I know Scott Bakula is on record as saying, wouldn't it have been great if I'd have actually leapt into the rape victim while she was being raped? And then here, a few months after this episode comes out, you actually effectively do that. You have him, you know, just at that point. So it's interesting to know that that's a coincidence, but it is something that I've always wondered about. Was had you heard Scott in an interview, or George heard Scott in an interview saying that? And I guess maybe not, which is fine. The other thing that I'm particularly interested in is this is really the only time that a Leapy gets to speak to Sam and say, hey, thanks for the change you've made in my life. So was that what kind of did that then come out of the twin thing, that you wanted to have that opportunity to be able to do that?
I don't know if it was specifically to have him be thanked, although that was a nice touch at the end. That may have been on my brother. I don't know. I was just more interested in the actual, like, I remember thinking, like, could they talk to each other during, you know, or would it, like, so I like the way when we had it be where, like, she saw Al a few times too, and like, just because they had that twin connection. But it wasn't like, I guess I was thinking at some point maybe they could actually, the other one could sense him and they could talk to each other, but it didn't turn out that way. But then once he made the final leap, then they actually could. And I don't know if maybe it was like, maybe there was like a limited time for that, because I always thought, and I'm trying to remember how the show worked, like when the person, I don't know if they ever really got into this, when the person got themselves back, like after Sam was gone, were there memories of like what happened, just kind of hazy, or like, you know, and in this case she kind of remembered, she's like, oh, I remember the last few days, and and then they get to have a conversation about it. But I forget how that went on the actual show, like if that person just was kind of like, oh, what the heck happened to me for the last couple of days.
It's so within the TV series itself, it was never really tackled except a little bit in season one episode, very briefly. When it comes to the overall Quantum Leap canon, effectively Tale of Two Cindy's and one of the novels called Foreknowledge have been the only two bits of evidence that fans have had to say this is what a Leapy's experience is like. So when I say you put something unique into canon, that's what I mean. This is that the fact that you could actually see a Leapy returning is very cool. And anyone that's not read the comic so far, I think, is missing out, because they've not seen that. The reboot has gone into that a little bit more, because one of the original Leapys is now one of the main characters. But I digress. Point is, really great moments, and the background really interested me. Sticking with that final sequence and that second leap, I wonder if you could talk to me a little bit about any of the thinking you recall around the twist that it wasn't the obnoxious jock character that you kind of expect it to be. Actually, it turns out to be the nerd. That looking back, it seems so obvious,
nerds.
But
I will say
tart.
that I am telling you, I don't know if I told you this when we spoke on Facebook, but well, first of all, I give my brother all credit for that twist there. I think that was his idea. But the one line that I kept saying, take that out. It was that promiscuous tart. And I was like, people don't talk like that. I don't care if it's the 50s. I don't care what, like, he's a dweeby little dude. Like, you're going to have him say, you promiscuous tart. I just hated it so much. I hate it to this day. I think about it. It's out there with my name on it. And I'm just like, oh my God. Anytime I have a chance to tell somebody that was my brother's line, that was totally my brother's line. So yeah, that wasn't me. But I did like the idea of it being, it was just like one little more twist to put in there. It wasn't who you thought. Mm-hmm. And then she manages to avoid the whole thing anyway because of Sam, leaping, not being there, not for the reason that he thought he was, which I guess happened somewhat often in the show. Like, I was wondering, like, Al's supposed to have all this information, but, he would always be like, hey, there's an 80% chance you're here to do this. And then later in the show, he's like, oops, I was wrong again. He never seems to have a problem with Al's misinformation. But
it never gets questioned. And there's a great trope that I love throughout Quantum Leap of the what I refer to as the murder mystery with 3 suspects. It's not always a murder mystery, but it's such a small number of suspects. And the trick is to make sure that the audience isn't thinking which one of them is it. And A Tale of Two Cindy's does that. It sets states right from the outset. It's only this one guy. So I don't think you're really thinking along, are there any other men present that it could be? And as soon as you start doing that, of course, you realize there's only really two male characters in there. It could be, if there's going to be a twist, that's going to be it. But it comes out of nowhere. So I got to admit, I didn't notice the promiscuous tart line because I was too busy going, oh my goodness. And it's this beautiful, I want to ask you about this as well in a minute. It's this beautiful piece of art where you kind of see him towering over in it, and or see him towering over Sam. So it's such a gorgeous looking moment. Did you have any idea what the artwork was going to look like as you were working on it with George? Because it's quite a unique style compared to the rest of the range. I mean, every issue has its own very unique look, but this has this kind of painted style, which is just, it's gorgeous. It's sumptuous. Was that what you were expecting in your mind? Did you expect something a bit more flashy and comic booky? What were you sort of thinking as you were writing?
I guess probably in my mind, I knew what my brother's artwork always looked like, and he has a style, that sort of, when he's doing other things, it sort of bleeds into those other things. So I probably in my head, I was imagining it as Quantum Leap as drawn by my brother. So yeah, I mean, I probably wasn't thinking about it at all. I would say that more in my head was, I was always, I think, imagining it as an episode of the show, not so much as because I was never, sorry everybody, I was never much of a comic book fan, but I was much more of a TV fan. So I think to me it was always playing out in my head as an episode, and I probably had it even cast in my head for all I know. I don't know who would have played Cindy in my mind back then.
Oh, that would be lovely to know. But
well, let's say what year would that have been? Sometime in the 80s, or
this was what 92?
Well, no, the book came out in 92. Gosh, I can't even think. It would have been the 80s. I could come up with somebody, but I don't know. I don't know who it would have been, but I'm sure that probably in my head I was imagining something. But to me, it always felt more like a live action, TV show, just because that I didn't have that sort of, comic book mind, I guess you could say.
Yeah, fair enough. I said I wasn't going to ask any of my standard questions. There is a standard question that I do like to throw in. Did you take the opportunity to slip in any Easter eggs or references to people you knew? The one that particularly jumped out at me is Martin Van Buren High School. Was that your high school?
No,
just a random high school.
I think, knowing my brother the way I do, I think he probably just picked the most random person, the most random historical figure to just throw in there. Because neither of us went to a school named that, and I don't know of any place around here even with that name. So
I know if I were like you, not an ongoing professional comic book writer, just given the opportunity to work on one, I know I'd be so unprofessional just filling it with loads of references to my friends and family. But no, if you didn't, good for you. That's
I mean, we probably could have with the names, but you know, I think he came up with naming them Cindy, and because I think I actually had their names different at the beginning, and he came up with that punny, and I love a good pun, you know. So he came up with the tale of two Cindys, so they had to be named Cindy and Sandy, or Cindy and anything, I guess.
Is there anything else? We've kind of jumped around the book a little bit. Is there anything that I've not asked you about that you think would be interesting to talk about? I know you were obviously desperate to talk about the Promiscuous Tart line. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I mean, like I told you when you first reached out, I was like, gosh, I don't know how much help I'm going to be with this, because it was so long ago, and I don't even remember a lot of the process, but I remember enjoying, you know, getting to do it, and, you know, just getting to pitch that idea, and I'm glad that it was done. I don't know if Quantum Leap ever did a twin episode after that.
There was
that I'd ever heard of.
No, one of the novels did a twin episode or a twin novel where he leapt into both twins at once.
Okay, see, that was always like the things that I was thinking, like what would happen, you know, like. But I think that we handled it well, and I think my brother really helped kind of flesh out my idea, to make it just a little easier for people to follow, and, you know, for the format that it was in. Maybe if it was an episode of the show, you could have gotten a little more weird with it, or like, you know, a little more, you know, visual, because when you think about it visually, you know, it just, the things that I was thinking, I guess, would have translated better to the screen than to the page. So I think he did a really good job of, you know, taking that and making it make sense for a comic book.
Yeah, and it's a great story, and I know I mentioned this earlier in the interview. I would definitely recommend to any of our watchers and listeners that haven't tracked it down to do so, because it is doing something unique, and a lot of the comic books played it, and I don't mean any disrespect to the range, but they played it relatively safe in terms of these were straightforward standard leaps. Tale of Two Cindy's is something very different, and I applaud it for that. I think it's great. Given the fact that you'd come into the range in such a unique way, and you'd done such a unique thing, do you think there would have been a chance of a follow-up of some sort for you? Would you have come back if the range had been extended? We all know it only ran for a dozen issues, but do you think Georgia might have invited you back for the second run of 12?
Yeah, I mean, we don't hate each other, so we're actually siblings who get along. So it would have been fun to, you know, do something else or come up with another idea. No promiscuous tarts in the second one. That would have been great. I did just think of something, and I don't think that I think it was the Cindy was more because of the pun, but I did have my very first dog's name was Cindy. So there's a little bit of a tie in there with the question that you asked before. Yeah. So I probably at that time, she was already gone by then, but at that time, I probably thought like, oh, you know, we get to use my old dog's name, but it really had nothing to do with it. I'm sure it was just named that way just for the title opportunity alone.
Yeah, it's an obvious pun, but it's nice that it meant something to you at the time. Look, Becky, it's been really fun speaking to you, and I know you said when I reached out to you first, you didn't know how much you'd remember. You've shared so many great memories with me. It's made me want to go back and read the comic again. It's been a genuine pleasure speaking to you. So thank you for your time, and thank you on behalf of the fans who I know have been watching this and enjoying your memories. Thanks for joining us on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.